"Now what?" said Aunt Petunia, looking furiously at Harry as though he planned this. Harry knew he ought to feel sorry that Miss Pig had broken her leg, but it wasn't easy to remind himself it would be a whole year before he had to look at Tibble's snowy Mr. Paws and Tuffy again. "You could phone Marge," Uncle Vernon suggested. "Don't be silly, Vernon. She hates the boy." The Dursleys often spoke about Harry like this, as though he wasn't there, or rather, though he was something very nasty that couldn't understand them, like a slug. "What about, what's your name? Your friends? Your Bunny?" "On vacation in Majorca," and Petunia said. "You could just leave me here," Harry put in hopefully. "He'd be able to watch what he wants on television for a change, and maybe even have go in Dudley's computer." And Petunia looked as though she'd just swallowed a lemon. "And come back and find the house in ruins?" she sneered. "I won't blow up the house," said Harry, but they weren't listening. "I suppose we could take him to the zoo," said Aunt Petunia slowly, "and leave him in the car. The car is new. He's not sitting in it alone." Dudley began to cry loud. In fact, he wasn't really crying. It had been years since he'd really cried, but he knew that if he screwed off his face and wailed, his mother would give him anything he wants. "Dinky Doody Dums, don't cry. Mommy won't let him spoil your special day," she cried, fingering her arms around him. "I don't want to come," Dudley yelled between huge pretended sobs. "He really spoils everything," he shocked Harry, a nasty grin, though the gasp in his mother's arm. Just then the doorbell rang. "Oh, God, they're here," said Aunt Petunia faintly, and a moment later Dudley's best friend Pierce Wilkins walked in with his mother. Pierce was a scurry boy with a face like rat. He was usually the one who held people's arms behind their back while Dudley hit them. Dudley stopped pretending to cry at once. Half an hour later, Harry, who couldn't believe his luck, was sitting in the back of the Dursleys' car with Pierce and Dudley on the way to the zoo for the first time in his life. His uncle and aunt hadn't been able to think of anything else to do with him, but before they left, Uncle Banner had taken Harry aside. "I'm warning you," he had said, putting his large purple face right up close to Harry's. "I'm warning you now, boy. Any funny business, anything at all, and you'll be in the cupboard for now until Christmas." "I'm not going to do anything," said Harry, honestly, but Uncle Vernon didn't believe him. No one ever did. The problem was, strange things often happened around Harry, and it was just no good telling the Dursleys he didn't make anything happen. Once, Aunt Petunia, tired of Harry coming back from the Barbarians looking as though he hadn't been at all, had taken a pair of kitchen scissors and cut his hair so short he was almost bald except for his bangs, which she left to hide that horrible scar. Dudley had laughed himself silly at Harry, who spent a sleepless night imagining school the next day, where he was already laughed at for his baggy clothes and taped glasses. Next morning, however, he had gotten up to find his hair exactly as it had been before Aunt Petunia had sheared it off. Harry had been given a week in his cupboard for this, even though he had tried to explain that he couldn't explain how it had gotten back so quickly. Another time, Aunt Petunia had tried to force him into a revolting old sweater Dudley's brown with orange puffball. The harder she tried to pull it over the head, the smaller it seemed to become, until finally it might have fitted in a puppet, but certainly wouldn't fit Harry. Aunt Petunia had decided it must have shrunk in the wash, and to his great relief, Harry wasn't punished. On the other hand, he'd gotten into terrible trouble for being found on the roof of the school kitchens. Dudley gang had been chasing him as usual when, as much of Harry's surprise as anyone else, there he was sitting on the chimney. The Dudleys had received a very angry letter from Harry's headmistress telling that Harry had climbed school buildings, but all he tried to do as shouted its Uncle Vernon, though the locked door of his cupboard was jumping behind the big trash cans outside the kitchen doors. Harry supposed that the wind must have caught him in a mid-jump. But today, nothing was going to be wrong. It was even worth being with Dudley and Fierce to be spending the day somewhere that wasn't school, his cupboard, or Miss Fink's cabbage-smelling living room. While he drove, Uncle Vernon complained to Aunt Petunia. He liked to complain about things. People at work, Harry, the council, Harry, the bank, and Harry were just a few of his subjects. This morning, it was motorcycles, roaring along like mechanics, the young hoodlums, he said, and a motorcycle overtook them. I had a dream about a motorcycle, said Harry, remembering suddenly. It was flying. Uncle Vernon nearly crashed into the car in front. He turned right around his seat and yelled at Harry, his face like a gigantic beak with a mustache. Motorcycles doesn't fly. Dudley and Pierce sniggled. I know they don't, said Harry. It was only a dream. But he wished he hadn't said anything. If there was one thing that Dudley hated even more than his asking question, it was his talking about anything acting in a way it shouldn't, no matter if it was a dream or even a cartoon. They seemed to think he might get dangerous ideas. It was a very sunny day, and the zoo was crowded with families. The Dudleys brought Dudley and Pierce large chocolate ice cream at the entrance, and then, because the smiling lady asked what ice cream would Harry want, so they bought him a cheap lemon ice pop. It wasn't bad either. Harry thought licking it at a watched gorilla scratching its head who looked remotely like Dudley, except that it wasn't blonde. Harry had the best morning he'd ever had in a long time. He was careful to walk a little way apart from the Dudleys so that Dudley and Pierce, who were staring to the bored with the animals by lunchtime, wouldn't fall back on their favorite hobby of hitting him. They ate in the zoo restaurant, and when Dudley had a tantrum because his Kinder Buckle Glory didn't have any ice cream on the top, Uncle Vernon bought him another one, and Harry was allowed to finish the first. Harry felt afterward that he should have known it was all too good to last. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows all along the walls. Behind the glass, all sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and stone. Dudley and Fierce wanted to see huge poisonous cobras and thick man-crushing pistons. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Aunt Bernard's car and crushed it into a trash can, but that moment it didn't look like in the mood. In fact, it was fast asleep. Dudley stood with his nose pressed against the glass, staring at the glistening brown coals. "Make a move," he winked at his father. Uncle Vernon tapped on the glass, but the snake didn't budge. "Do it again," Dudley ordered. Uncle Vernon rapped the glass smartly with his chuckles, but the snake just snoozed on. "This is boring," Dudley mourned. He shuffled away. Harry moved into of the trunk and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had that of boredom in itself. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the grass, trying to disturb it all day long. It was worse than having a cupboard at a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia hammering on the door to wake you up. At last, he got to visit the rest of the house. The snake suddenly opened its beady house. Slowly, very slowly, it raised its head until its eyes were on a level with Harry's. It winked. Harry stared. Then he looked quickly around to see if anyone was watching. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and winked too. The snake jerked its head toward Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eyes to the ceiling. It gave Harry a look that said quietly plainly, "I get that all the time." "I know," Harry murmured through the glass, though he wasn't sure the snake could hear him. It must be really annoying." The snake nodded vigorously. "Where did you come from, anyway?" Harry asked. The snake jabbed its tail at a sign next to the glass. Harry peered at it. "Boa Constrictors, Brazil." "Was it nice there?" A boa constrictor jabbed its tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. The specimen was bred into the zoo. "Oh, I see. You've never been at Brazil?" As the snake shook its head, a deafening shouting behind Harry made both of them jump. "Dudley, Miss Dudley, come and watch looking at this snake. You won't believe that it's doing." Dudley came wading toward them as fast as he could. "Out of your way, you," he said, punching Harry on his ribs. Caught by surprise, Harry fell hard on the concrete floor. What came next to happen so fast, no one saw what happened. On second, Pierce and Dudley were leaning right up close to the glass. The next time, they had leaped back with howls and horrors. Harry sat up and gasped. The glass front of Boa's constrictor tank was vanished. The great snake was uncoiling itself rapidly, slithering out onto the floor. People throughout the reptile house screamed and started running for the exit. As the snake slightly swept past them, Harry could have sworn a low, hissing voice said, "Brazil, here I come." "Thanks, amigo." The keeper of the reptile house was in shock.